It's just a little bit of background. We have all learned the traditions of our instrument, what our teachers have told us, and what we've read. This is primarily based on guesswork, speculation, in regards to what happens on the inside, because we can't see it. I can talk louder. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So most of the traditions in teaching saxophone in regards to the inside, from the embouchure to the vocal folds, from here to here, is called the vocal tract. That's a linguistics term. I didn't make it up. That's just what they call it. So I say vocal tract. All the information about the vocal tract has been speculation. We guess what we're doing. And a lot of times we don't have a picture of what the anatomy looks like, or we feel something different. So I'll have you try this. Sometimes we have trouble associating what we feel like to what we're really doing on the inside. So try this. I want you to pronounce 3 consonants: K, G, and Q, and tell me which one you think is farthest in. K, G, Q. Okay, how many say that G is farthest in? How many say K is farthest in? And Q? Now, before I tell you what it is, this is linguistics. This has to do with the International Phonetic Alphabet and all of the designations for specific sounds. Some sounds can have multiple contact points and other ones can't. G is universal. That sound, G. If you pronounce it in a different spot, you get a different sound than that. And it hasn't got anything to do with language, except for codifying language. It doesn't have anything to do with your accent, because it's the sound itself. That's a very important principle as we talk later about the use of vowels. Because we're not talking about, again, language or accents, we're talking about a sound.
Phonetic alphabet.
It's the International Phonetic Alphabet. Those are that's the codification or the designations that we use. All right, so with K, G, and Q, those really only have one spot that will make those sounds. So K is farthest in, and it's just on the soft palate. G is next, and Q is farthest forward. There's a little exception with Q, because some people pronounce that word with a K, and they go Q, like that, Q. You hear that? It sounds different than Q. So one way with a K is Q, and the other Q. They actually sound a little different. So if you were saying that Q is farthest back, you're probably using a K. But most people pronounce it farther forward. So the point, though, is that it's hard to tell. That's all. It's hard to tell. I had a student once, I had this exercise we do with these little plastic rods called pickup sticks. It's part of a game. And it's a really thin plastic rod. And I use that for a student to tell what their tongue is doing. They can play a note, and you can put it in the corner right here, and they can touch the tongue all over and find out what shape it's in, whether it's going up or down, if it's close to the reed or far. I was going to bring some of those, but I just forgot. But they're really handy. I just bought them on the internet. It's called pickup sticks. Get the plastic kind, not the wooden ones, because you get splinters. All right, so with the pickup stick, this student had been taught various things about tongue shapes. For example, if you were to bend the pitch down, there are several ways to do that. One is loosening the embouchure, but it won't go very far, and you lose your tone. Another one is by arching the back of your tongue way, way far back. And it'll bend a ways. You can get probably a third. I know some that have gone farther. But there's another way that'll bend farther and sound better, give you a stronger sense of sound and acoustic energy. And that's bending the center tongue, just right up front. And I'm going to show you some images in a minute, and you'll see what all these parts are. But the point is, she had learned how to arch the tongue up and down in the right places. She had been studying with me for a couple of years, and so she knew how to do all this stuff. She's playing a high C sharp on the tenor saxophone, and the pitch was sharp and somewhat shrill, meaning too many high frequencies in the sound. So I said, arch your tongue a little bit, a little more arch to the tongue, right in the middle. And so she, quote, arched the tongue, and it got more sharp, and it got more bright. So she said, well, that might work for you, but it doesn't work for me. The implication is, I am unique, and things are different, because my physiology is not the same as yours. Well, there's truth to that, but we are also all human, meaning you have teeth, you have lips, you have a tongue, you've got a larynx, you've got a vocal tract, you have all these parts. And in this method of teaching, we're talking about what I call macro movements, large-scale movements, the big picture. Then there are the micro movements, the really subtle things. Those things you have to learn on your own. Those are the ones that are unique to your anatomy. So this was a large-scale movement that she was trying to do. So the statement, well, that works for you, but not for me, was just not right. She just wasn't arching. So I said, no, you're not arching your tongue. Oh, but I am. So I had her take her stick, and she played the note, she put the stick in, and she arched the tongue, and the end of the stick went up. If the end of the stick on this side goes up, the other side must be going down. So the feeling of arching to her was dropping the tongue. So she had to relearn what that sensation was that created the right formation. That's the terminology I use. The sensation has to equal the formation. So part of this is just learning what you're really doing. You know, if you have a teacher that says, and you all realize that you're going to get a lot of different opinions about how things work, partly because they do work in different ways, and a lot of, you can have seemingly conflicting opinions, and they can all be right. And I'll show you.
Because the person might be feeling it a little bit differently than they really are doing.
And that's what I'm getting at, is if you're told you're doing something specifically, like to play a low note, open the throat. Well, I hear that a lot. And so the person works and works, and months go by, and finally they get the low notes to sound right. And they go, oh, now I'm opening, and that's what it feels like. Well, they're not. They're associating the wrong sensation with the formation. All right, so because I was recognizing these things, I remember playing a master class once, and on tenor saxophone, I had all these low notes, and the listeners, the audience after it was over said, oh, your low notes sound so good. And I felt so guilty because I knew that I was not doing what I was told to do. Therefore, I thought, well, I'm cheating. I'm doing it wrong. Well, because of that situation and many others, I wanted to find out for sure what we were doing on the inside. Ray told me about a person named Ray Wheeler. Eugene Mousseau also told me about Ray Wheeler, and Peter Clinch and a few other people. So I looked up, Ray Wheeler did some research in the 1960s. 1967 was his first project where he used what he called cinefluorographic x-rays. We just call them fluoroscopes now. And it's motion picture x-ray.
Published those things in the early 70s.
Yeah, 71 and 73.
NACWAB, I don't know if it's ever here. National Association of College and Percussion Instructors.
That's right. He also presented it at the National Clarinet Association Conference, and he was laughed out of the room. So I called him up. I found him. He was teaching at Central Washington in Ellensburg. And so I called him on the phone, and I said, hey, what's this all about? And so he sent me all of his research. I had all of it. I had all of his research notes. I had his original experiments, what he had his subjects do. I had the articles. I had the video. I had all of it. So the first thing that I did was to replicate his study. Because no science is accurate or can be considered a true principle unless it can be repeated. If you can't repeat it, then you got something wrong. So I repeated his study. Ray participated in that study. We had 12 people there. I was living in North Dakota at the time, and I flew out to Salt Lake where Ray was, and we did this study. We did all the things that Ray Wheeler had done. And
Mark's fortunate, his brother's a veterinarian, and he owns all the gear. So we had a fluoroscope, he also had the fiber optic endoscope. We could do some of those things.
take advantage of your resources. You guys more now. Now we've got radiation therapy. You want to believe that? Pinpoint radiation for animals. The funny thing is, every time we use the scope, you'd say, do you know where that scope has been? So we replicated it, and guess what we found? Ray was right, Ray Wheeler. We replicated it. It came out with the exact same result. So although he was laughed out of the room, the people laughing were wrong. Ray had it right. Now, we proceeded then with another 17 studies at different time periods. The first one, I called Ray Wheeler in 1995, and then I started doing research for anything I could find where people had done this before, and I found a handful of dissertations where people had used X-rays or other technologies. And then in 1998, I repeated the study in Salt Lake, and so from that time period until just probably last year, or a year and a half ago, we went through about 18 different projects. Those projects included the X-rays. That was our most reliable source. I also tried ultrasound, and you can see some things, and you can go online to YouTube and you can see some things, but the X-rays are a little bit more clear. You can use MRI. There's two disadvantages with MRI. It's a great image. One disadvantage is you have no bone structures. It's only the fleshy material. Whereas X-rays, you can see a little bit of both. And the thing about MRIs is it's incredibly expensive. And I was able to make contacts or get grants or whatever. I did X-ray studies in Fargo, North Dakota. I did some in my hometown, Rexburg. We did some in Salt Lake. We did them in different places. And the only one I ever had to pay for was the one in North Dakota, and I got a grant for that, so it was pretty economical. And Indiana is the one that calculated all of the exposures and all that, so it's kind of all over the country.
Also spent some time in North Texas.
For different parts of the studies. That's for the fluoroscope. Then with the endoscope, my brother owns an endoscope, and we did most of them with him. But there was a local ear, nose, and throat doctor that spent a lot of lunch hours with me working out some of the endoscope. And he also had a portable unit that he lent to me, and so I learned how to put tubes up your nose. It's not a pleasant experience.
We did that at the University of Utah, where we dropped the endoscope here so we could look at the larynx. Weird to have, kind of weird to have that thing in the corner of your mouth when you're playing, but you get used to it pretty quick.
Well, we did the one down the nose to get the larynx and the vocal folds. And that, the reason we did the University of Utah Medical Center is, for one, that's one of, in the United States, that's one of the leading centers for throat therapy. And there are two doctors there that are nationally renowned. So being able to work with them was quite an honor. One is Marshall Smith, and the other is Ingo Tietze. Ingo wasn't there when we did the study, but Marshall was. And they also have a strobe on the endoscope. The strobe lets you see the folds movement. And one of the things we wanted to find out on that study was, do the vocal folds vibrate when you play a saxophone? What do you think? When you're playing a saxophone, do your vocal folds vibrate? Opinions, what do you think?
Yes.
Okay, the answer is probably no. As far as the kind of movement that you see when phonating or speaking or singing, it absolutely is not doing that. If you do that, you get a growl out of the instrument. That's how the jazz players get that growl sound, is by vibrating the vocal folds. The question then is, well, what about the mucosa? The mucosa is what wraps over the vocal ligaments, and that's what you're seeing move. Does that have a sympathetic vibration? Is it moving even subtly? Well, I talked to the physicists at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. They have been consultants for the last 8 years, and I think I've really worn them out. So I asked them that. I presented our findings, and I said, well, what do you think? Is it possible for them to vibrate? And he said, we did studies, they had other technologies they used, with trumpet and the vocal fold to see if they were vibrating, and they were. So a very subtle vibration that you cannot see with the strobe is happening with trumpet. He said, however, it is probably not happening with a saxophone because there's not enough back pressure like there is on a trumpet. And so he does not think that they vibrate, even in that subtle way. That subtle way we're talking about is so minute, though, that it's unlikely that it has any effect on your sound. So the answer then, do your vocal folds vibrate? Probably not. And I always say probably because I need the physicist to actually do that particular study he did with the trumpet to know for sure. But they're not vibrating like you think. They're not vibrating like they would if you were speaking or singing. They're definitely not doing that. And we have plenty of video of that. We don't need to show that. I want to show some other things. But we do have plenty of shots of the vocal folds movement, playing and not playing, and growling and humming. And we got it all. So that was another study. Another one we did was just to see where mouthpiece pitch would be. That's a popular teaching concept with Santi Runyon's students, with Eugene Rousseau's students, and it's spread fairly far and wide to declare that a certain mouthpiece pitch is optimal for playing a saxophone. So we did extensive studies on that. One of them was down at the University of North Texas. Eric Nestler helped set that up, and Brad Lely participated. And it was really a great experience. Spent a week down there. It was wonderful. And then another study was with airspeed. And this is here's another question for you. Does the air go faster for high notes and slower for low notes, or is it something else? What do you think? How many think the air goes faster to play high notes on a saxophone? Nobody wants to say anything. And that's fine. Well, I presented that question to the physicists, and I'm going to tell you about these physicists just really quickly. In 2000 and 2001, I published 3 articles in the Saxophone Symposium, and to publish those articles, victory. Whoa! Where's your technology? Well, let them figure it out. I'll keep telling you something. So, to publish those articles, and since I started the research in '95, like I said, I went back and I studied everything that had been published anywhere. And this, of course, was before all the online access, so it was microfiche and interlibrary loan and all these things. So then I published those articles and I continued to research until 2010, and I had a sabbatical leave in 2010 where I cataloged all the video I had up to that point, which was over 800 samples. I have over 1,000 samples that came up with the final product. So I realized then that there was a 10-year period where I had not researched what other people had done. So now I have the internet, and I was able to look up the Journal of the Acoustic Society of America, the Australian Acoustic Society, and various other sources. And I found a whole string of articles specific to the wind player's vocal tract, and much of it was saxophone, a lot of it was clarinet, there was some flute, there was some voice, all coming out of the University of New South Wales with Professor Joe Wolf leading the team. So when I found that in the fall of 2010, I called him up. So I was talking to Joe on the phone. I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. And I introduced myself. And he said, oh, we know you. And I said, what? Why would physicists at the University of New South Wales know my name? He says, well, those articles you published in the symposium, if you had not published those articles, we would not have known where to start. So they took it from where I left off and carried it forward with the physics side of everything. And it was fascinating. I read so many books on physics and acoustics and understood about half of it, maybe. That's not my field, but it is theirs. And so everything in this book that has anything to do with science has been read and reread and corrected by Joe Wolf and a guy that teaches or works for the, what is it called? The Institute for Technology and Design in Singapore. His name is Dr. Jermaine Chen, or Chen Jermaine. And then also a gentleman by the name of Gary Scavone, who works at McGill University in Montreal. These were leading people that had published these articles. And so I'm talking to all of them. You know, mostly after the phone calls, we went to email and just wore them out. So everything in this book that has anything at all to do with science has been double-checked and triple-checked by those three guys. And a lot of it is just direct quotes from them where I said, hey, that's a great answer. Can I put that in the book? And so they'd write back and said, okay, but let me rewrite it. And so they would rewrite all these parts. And I've told you that in the book where they're talking and where they're not. But it's all double checked. So that was really a fascinating thing to get caught up with all that research. Okay.
So we're halfway through my
Yeah.
Let me just recap real fast that piano pedagogy, it's all right out here. String pedagogy, it's all right out here. Saxophone pedagogy, most of it's invisible. And this is what we've tried to empirically look at with the idea that we can come up with some pedagogical helps so that we can teach more effectively what really is happening and help our students skip a lot of that trial and error stuff. Still going to have to do a certain amount of it. But it's resulted in this phenomenal book. It's a really good study, but you need to see some of these videos. So
let's look at the key first. So in chapter 1, now let me make mention, if you do choose to get a copy of the book, this is a first run, right? So it does have some errors. Sorry, we tried real hard to not have errors. One is the fact that originally I had the first 2 chapters reversed. I had a chapter on embouchure first because the idea was to interest the reader before going into the science. So the science was chapter 2. Well, then a lot of the readers said, you know, really you got to put the science one first because it sets a foundation for everything you're talking about thereafter. I didn't want to put science first because it's boring, but I did. I flip-flopped it. Problem is, I put all the keys. You know, this is what the X-rays look like. These are what all the parts are. This is the endoscope. This is what all the parts are. I put those in chapter 1, embouchure. Then I flip-flopped the chapters. Now they're in chapter 2 because I failed to take the keys and put them into chapter 1. Now that has been corrected, and anything, and all the publications that come out after this first run will be correct. But the books we have here have the keys in chapter 2. So if you can deal with that, everything else is good.
You're not going to be able to see this. We couldn't get the big screen, so those of you who are sitting further back, there's lots of chairs really up close. You're going to have to come close if you want to see this. This is an example of the fluoroscope image and tracing and kind of what you see all the different parts you might be looking at when you see the videos. And the trace shows you where the hard palate is, soft palate, uvula, and the oral cavity shows where the teeth and mouth is. You kind of get oriented to this. So probably most of you know those parts. So,
I've seen a few descriptions in books on saxophone playing of what the larynx looks like and what the tongue looks like, and it's really quite comical because we don't look like that unless you're a Simpson or a Looney Tune cartoon. So, you know, most of us know where our teeth are, and we know where the front of our tongue is, but we don't all know that the tongue goes all the way down to here, and it's a big old giant mass. And we don't all know what the shape of the vocal folds are and how they work. So that's all in the book, and it helps you. as you're teaching, as you're learning to play, if you understand what your anatomy really is, then it's a lot easier to work with it, manipulate it, move it around, get the sounds that you want. So this helps with that. Let's look at a video. There's also a older that we should show in this one, just further down. And even the endoscope, where it's a camera showing the inside, is a little confusing until you get associated with it. We had this all set up, on it was really. So here's the other image. And with this you can see where the tongue is, you see the hard palate, you can see the teeth. A little bit on the bottom is the lip. The camera's catching just the edge of the lip. You can see the mouthpiece over on the side.
Some of you can see the breathing.
With the endoscope, I put the angle the same. Whether the endoscope was coming one side or the other, I put them all the same side so that it was easier to orient your perception of the image. Fluoroscopes could be facing either profile because it's much more obvious. Okay, we can go to this video. Let's look at, see, this would be chapter 5, and one that says range 4C. So with this was one of Ray Wheeler's experiments where he had the player play a low C, middle C, high C, and altissimo C, just to track the tongue change, tongue position change. So you can see the soft palate, you can see the larynx. So what we discovered as you watch this, notice that for the low notes, almost all players will arch the tongue and make a narrow channel. We're going to talk about that more specifically in just a minute. And then it goes to somewhat neutral for the mid-range. The back of it starts to open up as you go to the high notes. If the palm keys were on this example, which they are on other clips, you would see that the tongue goes forward a little bit more, and there's just a little bit of arch in front of the mouthpiece. It doesn't show that quite so clearly here because it's not a palm key note. It's a high C. And then with altissimo, it opens up really big, and the tongue gets real close to the reed. That's what you're looking for.
All these videos are available online right now. You can go and access them right now.
Do you want to write this down? I don't have anything to write on, but I can tell you the URL. Want to write down the URL? I can't tell you. You'll have to excuse me for not recognizing any of your expressions or hands because we just can't see. I believe you're there, right? All right, the URL. Of course, the HTTPS, since it's secure, so HTTPS :/content, CONTENT, content dot BYUI, that's my university, Brigham Young University, Idaho, dot edu for education. No, I didn't. This is it. HTTPS:/content dot BYUI dot edu /s/Mark Watkins, one word.
But there are download links in the book.
What?
In the book, there are some
It
download
gives you that
links.
info in the book.
That information is in the book.
There's tons of pictures in the book, but you can also access all these videos
Okay.
online.
Every significant point that I make in the book has an illustration, like you saw with the key. It's got 251 illustrations in the book, so everything is there. But it's really nice to see the video. It's amazing in teaching what happens to your students when you watch the video and say, do that. Emulation is such a marvelous teaching tool. And when you're watching and copying what you see and hear, you get a long ways without having to have a lot of explanation. It's wonderful that way. So when you go to that website, it'll open up just a menu that has the chapters listed. You click on a chapter and it jumps to YouTube. And in YouTube then it'll have all the videos for that chapter in order. And it's open access. We decided to do open access because we really want to get the information out there. All right, so this would be the range. And look for what I said and see what you see.
See it at all? It's all over there.
It is?
You see the tongue right here. The end is still down. Surprising? See how long we talked that the tongue goes up for the high notes. You see it's going just the other way around.
There's a video on here that shows you what happens if you do arch the tongue for the altissimo. It makes the note stop.
It's a little bit alarming. A lot more open for
And that's open to play low. That's another story. Just understand he's playing with the fingers out. So.
that tongue is big.
Now notice that the low notes on the baritone, the tongue can be a little lower. But notice the tone, that tone is a little bit bright. So it really depends on what you like. So notice how open it is. It's not open all the way, it's just a little more open than the other saxophones were. Partly that's because it's baritone, partly it's because that's how he sounds. That one's more arched. This is the jazz one. See how much arch there is on that one? Okay. I mentioned that.
Question?
Yes.
Do you think there is a big difference between jazz and classical players?
I had this whole chapter on that. And there is a difference. Obviously, the equipment's a little different, but as far as the player is concerned, we notice two things. One, the embouchure may be different. Some jazz players use the same embouchure they do for classical. Other ones will do it. In Richard's book, The Cambridge Companion to Saxophone, there's a chapter on jazz there where he explains this rollout embouchure. And we see that happening. We see players use the inside wet part. And sometimes people think, well, that puts more lip on the reed. Actually, it doesn't. It puts less lip on the reed, but keeps the cushion the same size. The space between the teeth and the reed stays the same when you do it that way, rather than thinning out. And it puts a little less lip on the reed, which increases the high frequencies and gives us more of a jazz sound. That's one thing. The other, in the vocal track, all the shapes are the same. In fact, some of the players you saw in here, some were classical, some were jazz. There's a mix. And so they're doing the same patterns, but jazz is a little more open overall. So for every stage, It's a little bit more space for jazz than there is for classical. And then it also increases high frequencies. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so I was mentioning that more than one philosophy or idea about how to play the different ranges of the instrument can all be true. For example, I was taught in our student band program by my band directors to play low notes on a saxophone, drop your jaw and open up. Well, if you do that, it probably won't sound like you want it to sound.
More like an airplane.
Lawnmower. So I decided to try this out, and I knew I was doing something different to play low that was not bad. So I decided to film. I asked the person on this clip. I have two clips of this. One of them is a classical player, and the other one, I still have the main example of classical, but then I have some excerpts of jazz players doing the same thing, so they're in two different chapters. We'll look at the classical one, but understand as a classical player doing this exercise. We have two parameters. And this is in low notes, and it's the vocal track embouchure comparison. That's the number one. So chapter 6, number 1. Okay. Yeah. So I had to play with the lined up embouchure. I call it a line, where the teeth are straight up and down like this, and then with an overbite farther back, like that. Then we have the vocal track as a narrow channel, where the tongue is arched, and an open channel, where everything is wide open. And then put those in combinations. So we had a lined embouchure, arched tongue. We had a lined embouchure, open track. We had overbite embouchure, arched tongue, and overbite embouchure, open. And the result was that a lined embouchure, arched tongue is a classical sound, matches the mid-register. In fact, I was talking to someone the other day, it was Preston Duncan, who's a great player.
Right here.
He's here.
Oh, nice.
He's here. Yeah, did you hear him play? He's good. We went to school for anyway, moving on. He mentioned that there was a school of thought where the tongue was arched more narrow for playing low notes. And that is what we find for classical playing. Not that you have to, but it does give a certain sound. And then with the overbite and arched tongue, that's more like a jazz ballad. Like you hear Ben Webster playing with that airy, what I call foo-foo saxophone. I think it sounds great. It's not quite arched as far as this one. This person was told to arch it all the way and play an overbite. When you actually play like Ben Webster, it's not quite arched that far. It's about what I call half arched. And then a lined embouchure totally open is a really big, bright sound. And when you increase high frequencies, you got to blow harder because it needs more energy. That's the physics of it. High frequencies require more energy. And when it's a conical instrument in the low register, so you have to blow harder, which makes them louder. That's appropriate to funk playing. Like if you listen to Tower of Power and hear Doc Kutka playing all those wonderful low notes, he's probably pretty open when he does that. And it works better on Barry than the other saxophones because it's acoustic taper. The cone is different than it is on a soprano, for example. And so you can have a little bit lower tongue for a baritone in the low register than you can on the other saxophones if you want to match the tone. So if you have a wide open, aligned embouchure, and you play a Barry like Doc Kutka, boom, you get that big whomp sound. And then one more, an overbite embouchure with an open vocal track. That, the player had to lower the jaw. So it was a drop your jaw, open the throat, but it also had an overbite. And that dampened the reed sufficiently that the low notes sounded good. I call that the jazz low note sound. So I have one I call it classical, the other one the ballad sound, the next one is the funk sound, and the next one is the jazz low notes. And so again, this is a classical player doing all of those combinations. And the chapter on jazz has the jazz player examples.
Line embouchure, narrow channel.
configuration.
Now the overbite on this year with the narrow channel.
It doesn't quite sound like a mount, like I said, it's too closed. But it's close. It's having a little bit of troubles because with it being that close, it doesn't quite work right. If you do more-
The line down this year with an open channel.
You know how bright that is? High frequencies.
Overbite on this year with an open door. These are all designed so you can pause and look at it longer.
Okay, we're running short on time. It might be fun to watch a couple of really quick clips here. Let's look at the circular breathing. That's really fun to watch. Let me check. So Ray was mentioning that these are designed, and on a lot of them there's many of the videos have explanations of what to look for. And I didn't try to time out how long it's going to take a person to read that while the video was playing. It was easier to make all the text blocks the same length and say, hit the pause button. You get to a text block, hit pause, read it, and go on. It's easy. Save a lot of space in the videos.
Is circuit.
Is it the lights?
I have this video, and perhaps it got messed up, but it's supposed to have, I have tracings, and you can watch the tracings move.
Again, if you're watching this, you can pause on it and read it.
There you go. So there's videos on double tonguing, videos on slap tonguing, videos on multiphonics, intonation, dynamics, vocal fret vibration, humming and playing. There's 105 video clips. And everyone is annotated like this and highly edited to make it precise and small. Questions? We're about out of time. Do you have questions?
Will you do a masterclass next Congress?
If they ask.
Yeah, I think it would be great. I'd like to see people kind of have a quick, like a lesson with you and see how you work with them. I think it would be fascinating. It's been fascinating to hear you talk about it, but even more fascinating would be to see you actually work with a series of people. That would be really interesting.
What's interesting is as these experiments were done over the years, every new discovery turned into exercises and application to known techniques like harmonics on here, for example, and other exercises. And over time, now I can almost not see like I mentioned, but over time they give me so much exposure to this, 23 years of this, I don't really need to see anything the person's doing. I can hear what's happening on the inside. So,
There are a lot of recommendations in the book, pedagogically.
a lot of exercises in the book. So I can do that.
Mark, it's Richard here. Just to let people know, you can obviously look at the book, but it's not just videos and telling you what's in the videos. The pedagogical work is just exemplary, and Mark's references to the scientific work and his acknowledgements are just amazing.
It's a beautiful book.
It would take as long as the lecture time to describe how good this book is.
It's available here at a discounted rate. It's available at Richard's booth over in the exposition area. It's called
Logo
Music.
music.
So
When this is over, I'll stand at the back with the page with the URL so people can take a photo of it.
Yeah.
You know that.
And if
There are
you,
flyers on the stand if you choose not to get one now, where you can get them on Amazon. Later.
on Amazon, it'll cost $49.95, which is about 300 kuna. It's about, how many euros is that? 45, 42 euros, something like that. But we're selling it here for 180 kuna, 25 euros, and $30, and we'll get it. So that's 40% off, because it's the conference.
Book or not, all those videos are available to you freely.
Yeah. Videos are all free. No, I tried. It's too big. The publisher tried real hard to turn it into an ebook. I thought that'd be a great idea. And they even came back to me saying, if there's any way you can reduce the size, and I went into Adobe Acrobat Pro and I did all of their reduce the size things, and I only could take 5 megabytes off of 69. So you can't download it, it's too big. So
you can't-
unfortunately, no ebook. You can't. Like I said, we tried, but it's not possible with our modern current technology. It's just too big a document. 251 illustrations is a lot of memory. So hard copy is the way to go. If you combine the hard copy with the videos, believe me, you'll understand the videos better if you have a book to look at. It explains it in more detail than the video does. Other questions?
With all your research and sort of like studying like different people and that, did you ever come across like, I know I was a player and I know other people have, about the sensation when you soft palate collapses and the air escapes through the nose when you're blowing, and like what that would look like and sort of things that you do that can like sort of cause less pressure on that so you can understand about how to stop that sort of thing happening.
Well, we did run across this. That would be another step in the research because that gets into medical.
Okay.
And it was enough to go as far as we did. As far as what it looks on the video, you can't hardly tell. Some of them are clear enough where you can see a tiny little passage there. But as far as how to fix that, that's beyond quickest way to do. Like I said, it's medical. And I didn't go into medical. It's a good question. It does happen. Other questions? This is your chance. Discuss.
Not really a question, but just thanks for doing that because it takes someone to actually get all that done, get the technology to be able to see all that. I mean, that's not something that.
I'll tell you, I'm glad it is done because I don't want to do it again.
You can't even calculate how many hours of trying this.
There's no way.
And the money.
It's just, I just can't tell you how hard this was.
It is without a question the most extensive study that's ever been done on all these internal aspects that are usually invisible to us.
Right.
I'll mention too that the approach to this was, I tried to be totally unbiased towards anything. I wasn't trying to prove any preconceived idea. Every conclusion drawn in this book is based on observation and the science from the physicists. Totally. So I'm not coming into it with the opinion that it must be this way, and this is the best way to do it, and you should do it like this. There's none of that. It's just all on the observation. It's meant to be that way. And you can see, like with these combinations in the low notes, the reason I wanted to show you that is, depending on what your sound, the sound that you want is, whether it's jazz or classical or sometimes even equipment, what you're doing with your embouchure, you can get different combinations to achieve very similar things. So if a person has a different opinion than you, there's one
You might
of
be right.
one of two or three reasons. One, they could be doing it the way they say because of Amish or vocal tract combinations. Right? Two, they could be totally off the wall because they were taught a certain way and they just learned to imagine it that way. And that's all I'm supposed to do. Either they're right or they're wrong. How about that? You know?
Did you find anything changed within your own playing, having like gone through all this like studying and then seeing like footage of stuff and going, oh actually if I do it this way that might be better?
Well, what I found was that when I wanted to do something new or different, it was a lot easier to accomplish. Like circular breathing. I was not taught circular breathing. Right? Where was my undergraduate teacher in 1980s? You might not know this, but he's really old. But I didn't learn circular breathing. So when I did get around to learning the concept and applying it, trying to get it, I was playing David Maslenka's Mountain Roads Quartet, wonderful quartet. I was playing the baritone saxophone on that with some of my students. And if you can't circular breathe in some of those movements, you can't play it right. So that's an example of where I just had to make it work. And because I knew the anatomy, and I knew what it felt like to move the tongue in different ways, when I read about it and I filmed, this is Brent Jensen on film. Brent Jensen is a fantastic jazz player. He's had #1 jazz CDs in the charts, and just amazing. Studied with Lee Konitz. When I watched that, it was a lot easier to apply because I knew what all these shapes were. So the answer is yes. It's made a lot of things easier to know what's going on.
Maybe a little question for me again.
Yes.
Do you think, I mean, I play saxophone only, but I had problems with my embouchure a year ago, I still have. I searched for some videos exactly of this kind on YouTube, and I found the MRI videos of Sarah Willis, who is the horn player with the Berlin Philharmonic.
Right.
She does the same, but for horn. Do you think this applies also to other instruments than the saxophone? Because if other musicians, instrumentalists find out that it works for them as well, they will take all your books.
Well, I tried twice to film brass. So I had it all set up at the hospital, and then all my subjects canceled. It's hard to set these things up, you know. So the second time, got it all set up, they didn't cancel, but the machine broke. I did film clarinet, flute, oboe, and bassoon. And I can tell you what all those shapes are like. And there are many similarities. For example, on bassoon, we found two schools of thought, or two ways that bassoonists play. One is they keep the vocal tract all the way open, and all the manipulation for the conical bassoon and low register, high register is done with embouchure manipulation. The other way is less embouchure manipulation, less changing from overbite to a line, and the vocal tract works just like a saxophone. So that's one reason. I remember in graduate school there were quite a few saxophone students that were studying bassoon, and it was very successful. And I think that's the reason, because the vocal tract can work perfectly well on a bassoon. Oboe is similar, but it's a little bit lower right on top. And the flute is just open all the time. It's a totally different acoustic situation on the flute, so it's just always open. And the clarinet is just like a saxophone, except in the low register. And again, the acoustics are different. It's a cylindrical, stopped-in bore with a bell. And so the low register doesn't respond the same as a conical instrument does, like a saxophone. Which means that other than having to cover the holes, playing the low register on a clarinet is easy. You don't have to have the tongue arched. But if you drop the tongue, it does increase high frequencies, and it will raise the pitch, but it'll increase the high frequencies, and you get kind of a reedy tone. So you'll read some books where they say, to play low register on clarinet, you have to arch the back of the tongue. Not everybody does. The subjects I filmed, some arched it, some didn't. But the tone's different. Okay, and then there's subtle differences for intonation, like throat tones. You can see some movement around, you get throat tones in tune. But as far as the general shapes go, the low register can work the same, doesn't have to. Mid register is kind of what I call a neutral, where it's a fairly even tract from the embouchure to the folds. And the high register, the back of the throat opens up, tongue gets closer to the reed. That's exactly what we do on saxophone. So So I can't tell you if that's exactly like brass.
May I say something? I'm a professional trumpet player and saxophonist, and I would love to work with you. I would love to, you know, kind of be interested. Everyone tells me that playing these two instruments is very silly and it's so different, and I hugely beg to differ. I play them exactly the same, and I'd be fascinated to know.
I think a lot of the principals do carry it for us. We've spent our time, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Watkins. I wanted to say, if you didn't get to hear our quartet play yesterday, I do have some CDs here. I'd love to have you have one. This is a collaboration CD of double quartets. And so there are 10 pieces, 2 pieces with each of 5 different quartets. So there are 2 pieces with our quartet plus the Zagreb quartet, 2 pieces with the Miami quartet, 2 pieces with Richard Ingham's quartet from Scotland, 2 pieces with Saxophone from Luxembourg. Yeah, we played 2 nights ago here. We just left it. Yeah. It's a pretty cool project. If you'd like to copy, come on in.
You're free. You just take one. If you have any other questions, I'll stay as long as they let me, but I'm sure that they can have somebody else coming in.
Thanks so much.
But